Hello and welcome along to the Matchbook NFL podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Hussey, and joined one man down this week with a late withdrawal, but we have Rob Pizzola and Drew Dinsick to guide you through Championship Sunday. And Rob, before we get into it all, there's some couple of great games on Sunday night. Talk to me about the Cowboys.
Yeah, I mean, it's painful. I try not to set high expectations for a team, and based off of my fandom in life, generally the teams that I support always seem to fail. But it felt like a very winnable game. Stat line pretty even. Ultimately, turnovers end up costing Dallas, but ultimately also the game plan. And it's very frustrating for me when I do stupid things and I look back on them in hindsight, but expecting coaches to change their ways is a stupid assumption. And I made that last week, and I made that in the first week of the playoffs when I took the Bucks against the Cowboys as well. And lots of times I'll break down a matchup and I'll say, if this team does this, they have a very high likelihood of success in this game. But being reliant on a team trying to do that is where you come into issues. And there's certain coaches in the league that just do the same things over and over. It's very repetitive. We saw the Bucks do this all season long, right? Run the ball on first down and like there's no downfield passing game. What was going to stop them from doing that in a playoff game? I don't know. I don't know why I thought that would be any different. Last week, I came out here and I said, if the Cowboys run the ball like they've been doing all season, they're probably not going to have success against the 49ers rush defense that is very good. I don't expect them to do that. I expect them to work the screen game a lot more, so on and so forth. They did not do that. They just came down and tried to run the ball down the throats of the 49ers with Ezekiel Elliott. Then Tony Pollard gets hurt, and that like makes things even worse for them. But lesson learned, I think this is the evolution of betting. I bet for a living, and I still constantly make mistakes, and I'll never stop making mistakes. But I, you know, just extremely frustrating in putting my money down on coaches that I should have known better, really. So that's my takeaway from a personal betting point of view. The Cowboys lost. I will say this: it took me longer to get over the loss last year, where they ran that quarterback draw and ran out of time, than it's taken me this year. But regardless, it's fandom. You get your team to the playoffs, you always have that hope of winning it all, and still stings a little bit.
Yeah, as a Chargers fan, I can relate a lot to that, Rob, and you're helping me move on with my own defeats. Drew, you're describing Mike McCarthy's coaching performance, as an abomination.
It was terrible. And what's funny is that and I guess we really shouldn't be surprised. This is the way it goes in terms of who has the power in the organization. We know, but within minutes, it was immediate deflection from any of the decisions the owners made in terms of how they put together that roster. Immediate deflection away from McCarthy, who I thought absolutely bungled the final two possessions of that game. Especially the second to last one, just absurd lack of urgency. Don't get in your quarterback's ear on third down and be like, look, listen, man, like we got another chance if we don't get this first down, just don't take a sack. What does he do? He takes a sack. And then at that point, it's 4th and 10, and you have a very clear decision, punt the ball, but he wastes like 40 seconds getting his freaking punting unit out there. And that ultimately ended up being the entire game because they only got the ball back with enough time to do the gadget stuff. So it was an embarrassing performance all day, I thought, from McCarthy, but particularly at the end of the game where he was just staring like an idiot, expecting everybody else to do their job. And, he's in charge. And now they come out with a statement this week. A bunch of kind of good assistants are all getting let go. Like, okay, like you're going to solve this by letting go the O-line coach, who, by the way, solved the problem of you not having a swing tackle to start the season. Like, that guy did a great job with the offensive line and coaching up that talent. He's gone. Similarly, yeah, just like all the decisions, like the one guy you don't want back seems to be the only guy that's coming back. And Kellen Moore seems safe. Dan Quinn probably taking a job somewhere else. So I don't see any long-term reason to buy the Cowboys at this point. And I was very disappointed with them only coming away with 12 points last week. That was awful because the Niners played their bad game and they still won. Yeah. So it was that was a disappointing way to end the season. But the other kind of key takeaway I had was we came into the week seeing a couple of quarterbacks put together like career performances. Dak was one of them. Daniel Jones was one of them. And the idea that kind of people really, and myself included, like, we're like, man, right out of wild card weekend, just like, wow, maybe that's the new normal for these guys. No, those were outliers to the good, and they came crashing back to earth hard. And it really should not have been a surprise. And I'm trying. I bet the Eagles already, and we'll get to the specifics of that game. But I'm trying not to let the fact that the Eagles defense gave you a 99th percentile performance, sort of swing my, thoughts about this game coming up this week. But I do think you have to be just aware, like, recency bias is always an enormous problem for NFL betting because we have a week between games and everybody really is stuck on what did I just see. I mean, look at the awards, like the awards finalists, like people literally, voted for Brian Dable because he beat the hell out of the Indianapolis Colts in the second to last week of the season. They finished 2-5 down the stretch and they get beat twice by the Eagles, but nobody votes for Sirianni. They all vote for Dable. Okay, fine. There's a recency bias problem broadly with the way the NFL is covered. And if you can kind of snap yourself out of that, I think, you're in position to do a lot better betting week by week.
Final thoughts, Rob, just on that recency bias, because it's going to be prevalent now when we talk about these two games coming up.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is why we tend to look at larger samples. I think the crew here does a pretty good job of not getting stuck in what we saw last week. With that said, I mean, I've been pretty high on the Eagles for a while now. That to me is a powerhouse of a team. We're going to talk about the Eagles 49ers matchup as well. And I wouldn't let the blowout of the Giants last week influence your opinion this week. I would just take the large sample of the Eagles season, which was they were very, very good for a long period of time until Jalen Hurts got injured. But yeah, we do this tends to be the case in sports, not just the NFL, where people have short-term memories. It's hard to get that out of your head. You see a team play a stinker of a game, it's hard to put your money on them the next week because you just saw them play a stinker of a game. But water finds its level, as a friend of mine used to famously say, and I think that's just the case in the NFL.
Yeah, I know. I agree with all sports. It is very hard. The recency bias plays a part throughout the betting world here. Before we look at the Super Bowl outright prices, if you are watching on YouTube or you're listening on the podcast, head over to the YouTube video, hit that like button and comment for a chance to win a £50 free bet. That will be in your Matchbook account and available for new or existing customers. So we're going to pick a selection, comment whatever you want between the Super Bowl winners. Give us a bit of feedback for the show, your favorite memories of the show so far this year. Let us know. Hit the comments on the YouTube video and hit that like button. We'll get into the Super Bowl outright pricing because it is very interesting to have a look at what we currently have at matchbook.com. So the Eagles are the 3.5 favorites. Bengals 3.9 alongside the Chiefs at 3.9, with the 49ers being nibbled a bit since I last looked, 4.7. Drew, I'll hand over to you just to give people a bit of context to this time last week. We looked at these prices. Eagles were 6.6, Bengals were 11.5, the Niners were 5.2, and the Chiefs were 4.2 favorites. So between last week and this week's, the Chiefs have gone from 4.2 to 3.9.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just worth kind of pointing out, I've been doing this a long time. Closest I can ever remember the Final Four. It's like, this is by like a lot the closest. The implied look aheads here, if you kind of carry this through, would be no team favored by more than 3, irrespective of how the games this weekend play out outside of, catastrophic injury. We would not expect to see a Super Bowl lined outside of 3, which is exciting because, final 3 games of the season all being under a field goal is pretty cool, at least just from an entertainment standpoint, if you love the NFL. So very cool to see. I look at these numbers and I think of there's a very clear and obvious way to capture equity, in my opinion, and it is with the Chiefs. Because a Chiefs win this weekend and basically Mahomes answering any skeptical questions about his A, ability to beat the Bengals defense, and B, his, injury questions that are swirling. Once those two are answered with a win against the Bengals, assuming they win, then, the idea that they catch some meaningful upgrade in terms of how the market is rating that team is probably the most likely outcome. I don't know that even with an Eagles blowout of the Niners or the Niners' complete domination of the Eagles, that either of those teams really moves a ton against the likes of the Chiefs or the Bengals as we head into a Super Bowl matchup. So I kind of look at the other 3 teams and I think, okay, well, those are all kind of static prices, kind of independent of the outcome of these games. The Chiefs is the one that looks likely to move, if anything. So I don't love the matchup of the Chiefs versus the Eagles, which is, I think, what we're going to get. So I'm not going to take action on that, even though, there's a clear way to capture some equity there. But, I think just betting the Chiefs and the Eagles is a little bit, I'm more inclined to do that this week than I am really try to grab some future on KC and pocket some equity.
Yeah, and Rob, you would be leaning even more so to the Eagles there. So they are the current 3.5 favorites. I'm guessing you expect them to take care of the Niners this week.
I am. So we'll get to the breakdown of that game, but I do like the Eagles in that matchup. I echo a lot of what Drew said, though, as well. Like, really, I don't want to get involved in the KC-Cincinnati game because I don't have a strong opinion on the health of Mahomes. And there's some people who think that he's going to be very close to 100%. There's some people that think that, maybe he's letting, it's worse than he's letting on in practice this week and so on and so forth. I don't really want to take a stance on that. With that said, if you do, and you're comfortable in saying that there's value on the Chiefs this weekend and Mahomes is probably closer to 100%, or this isn't as big a drop-off as people realize, I think they're definitely worth a bet at that price because this is like adjusted now for what the spread is this week, and there might be value there. With that said, the Eagles, to me, they kind of fit the profile of teams that we've seen have success recently in the Super Bowl. You look at the last couple of years, the Rams being dominant against the Bengals on both lines of scrimmage. That was kind of the handicap going into last year. How is the O-line of Cincy going to hold up against this Rams D-line? Vice versa. The Rams O-line was pretty solid last year. They were able to overcome having the worst quarterback in the game in Matt Stafford against Joe Burrow because they were dominant on both lines of scrimmage. You look to the year prior where the Bucs just shellacked the Kansas City Chiefs. They killed them at the line of scrimmage in that Super Bowl. And the Eagles have a lot of what those teams had in that very, very good offensive line. No weaknesses. They can run the ball. They can pass the ball. When that offensive line rarely breaks down, they have a quarterback that can scramble and pick up yardage with his feet. Defensively, defensive line, very deep. They can rotate players in and out on that defensive line. Brandon Graham, Josh Sweat, Fletcher Cox, Javon Hargrave, Robert Quinn, who they acquired, Jordan Davis, who came back, Ndamukong Suh, who they picked up off the waiver wire in the middle of the year. So that, to me, is a team that has the pedigree and the talent, and they kind of fit the profile of if you're going to win without an elite quarterback, which, no disrespect to Jalen Hurts, I don't think he's in the conversation of an elite quarterback, you better have them on a cheap salary, rookie deal, and you better load up everywhere else. And that's what the Eagles have done. They've loaded up everywhere else. There's not a significant weakness on that team. It'd be very hard to come up with a game plan to exploit that team. So I think the Eagles are deserved favorites right now, and we'll get more into the matchup against the 49ers. But because I like them in the matchup, obviously I see a little bit of value them in the Super Bowl price as well. Uh-oh.
Oh, no.
Uh-oh.
No.
I like that. I like the whole breakdown. I think we're going to have a lot of the same opinions for the Super Bowl if it plays out the way we think this week. I'm not inclined to take the Eagles, though, because in the back of my head, Mahomes looking right, which is in the pantheon of possibilities. Mahomes, gets the Toradol shots and goes out there and by the way, his arm's just fine. He lights up the Bengals this week. I think there is an outside chance we catch a +3 with the Eagles in the Super Bowl. And if that is how that market manifests, then, hallelujah. Like, much rather have that than be sitting on what was the Eagles future price right now at Matchbook? Like 3.6, 3.5. Yeah. That's good. You can do better betting the Eagles this week and then taking +3 next week, in my opinion.
Yeah. I don't think that there's a scenario in which the Chiefs get, because either way it's going to be spun, right? Like, let's say Mahomes doesn't even look great this week and they win. He's going to have 2 weeks off in between the Super Bowl, and people will just talk themselves into, okay, it's 2 weeks, he's going to recover and so on and so forth. So I kind of agree with that with Drew. I'd be more inclined to just moneyline parlay Eagles this week and then the Super Bowl matchup. Super Bowl matchup with Cincy is probably a toss-up and very much in the pick'em range anyways. So you probably get a better price that way.
I think that's true.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And look, Chiefs are still, even though they're level with Bengals in the outright market, they are listed as the third favorites on my screen right now. We'll see if that's the case come kickoff on Sunday. But before we get into that game, we're going to cover the 49ers at Eagles. It takes place at 8 p.m. UK time. And we'll take a look at the betting that we currently have at matchbook.com. So you can see the money line has the Niners at 2.3, Eagles favored there at 1.75. The spread sees the 49ers get a 2.5 start at 2.02, and the total is in and around the 46.5 mark, and that's pretty even. Stevens 1.96 across the board, and that will even tighten further before kickoff. So we'll head over to you, Rob, for this one. Like, we've obviously, you do like Eagles in this matchup, but kind of trash that out a little bit first.
Yeah, so like if you're just like a pure power rating person, I don't think that this spread is off necessarily. Like, the Eagles slightly better than the 49ers, give them some home field advantage, but I'm not a pure power ratings person. I like to take the matchups into account, and I don't love this for the 49ers. You look at what worked well for them last week defensively. They were able to get pressure against the Dallas offensive line. Now, it wasn't consistent throughout the entire game, but that's been the bread and butter for the 49ers defense this year, their front seven. And now they go up against an Eagles O-line that really just blows other teams off the ball. Like, this is strength versus strength. I do think the Eagles O-line will hold up, but you have a quarterback who can scramble, who can get out of trouble if there's any sort of breakdowns. The 49ers have been very vulnerable to quarterback runs this year. If you look at quarterback scrambles against the 49ers, they're 26th in success rate this year. So there's an opportunity for Jalen Hurts in this game. And then also in the passing game, you're going to have Diamador Lenoir on the outside against one of A.J. Brown or Devontae Smith, and that is a very exploitable matchup for the Eagles. This is the challenge with having to defend A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith on the outside. There's always going to be one exploitable matchup there. So I do think that the Eagles can score in this game. I don't want to write off the 49ers defense by any stretch of the imagination, but I think they'll score the Eagles at a much higher clip than Dallas did last week for sure. On the other side of the ball, the Eagles produce a lot of pressure without having to blitz. They had the second highest pressure rate in the league this year without blitzing. That's extremely important. I mentioned it in the breakdown of the Eagles in terms of why I think they're a good Super Bowl bet. They mix in players on the defensive line. There's constantly guys that are fresh in there. And I think that's going to be a real challenge for Brock Purdy on the road. Raucous environment, having to a good defense who defends in breaking routes extremely well. And that's a big advantage here because the 49ers run the most in-breaking routes in the NFL, according to Pro Football Focus. They've done this for several years. It's the bread and butter of their offense, running towards the middle of the field. And the reason that Philly's so good at defending this is because their cornerbacks are great tacklers. They have great quarterbacks across the board. No team has allowed less yards after catch per reception on in-breaking routes in the NFL than Philadelphia, just 2 yards after catch for the entirety of the year. So what San Fran does well on offense, I think the Philadelphia Eagles are equipped for that. There's always a scenario where a team can just come out and run the ball down Philly's throat. We have seen it a couple times this year. That's maybe the one exploitable part of their entire defense, but they've improved on that as the year has gone on. And ultimately, I just don't see that being... Like, if San Fran wants to come and just try to run on every play, Christian McCaffrey a little bit banged up towards the end of last week as well, I think the Eagles and Eagles fans would happily take that as well. So I don't want to say I don't see a path to success for the 49ers. That's not true. But I just think that when accounting for how these two teams match up against one another, the 2.5 comes in short for me. I make this closer, just above a field goal, minus 3.1. I find value in Philadelphia at this price.
And yeah, you're true. You make it similar enough to Rob in terms of the three. You played Eagles money line at the start of the week. The money has come a small bit for the Eagles. But you do mention you can make the case for both teams. So we've talked a lot about the Eagles in general here. To make the case for 49ers.
Yeah, so the way the game breaks for me is much more kind of this feels like fragile game state a little bit. You have two relatively inexperienced quarterbacks, at least at this level. And you have two teams that I think are rostered and structured well to be able to protect a lead, which I think matters a lot. So now between the two teams, who do I think can do a better job protecting the lead? The Eagles, right? So it's a small kind of check in that box where if the Eagles do get out to a good start, if their offense is clicking early, if, as Rob mentioned, some of the matchup advantages they're able to exercise on in the first half of this game, like Eagles with a two-score lead in the second half, like that is dream come true for anyone who backed the Eagles, because they're letting that offensive line just go, run roughshod in the run block, and then letting your kind of wave after wave of D linemen get after Brock Purdy, putting him under distress and trying to make him make difficult throws off platform with his noodle arm. Like brilliant, beautiful potential second half outcome that I am dreaming about as I hold an Eagles ticket. The flip side, though, of if things are working out well and, Shanahan has more scheme up his sleeve than any other coach in the NFL, and if he brings out something unique that surprises the Eagles in any way, shape, or form, then they're successful early in this game, they can take a little bit of the pressure off Purdy, and this becomes a game where the Eagles have to throw their way back in, and potentially Hurts is kind of looking a little deer in headlights like we saw from him in the playoffs last year, and all of a sudden the fourth downs and sort of the plus EV decisions Sirianni makes, if those coin flips don't go their way, if they're getting a bad whistle, there are a lot of kind of intangibles that spook me a little bit about the Eagles in comeback mode against the Niners team that can absolutely protect the lead if it's asked of them. And so, I think the hope, if you're a Niners backer here, is that you get Deebo Samuel involved in the ground more. He was an integral part of their playoff run last year. Guy had 10, and 7 rushing attempts in their 3 playoff games last year. They have not gone to the well really this year. Some of that may be the injuries. Some of that may be they've kept him in their back pocket to try to use him when they need it most. And now is that time. And so, I've kind of circled that as one potential, weak spot, because Deebo Samuel is even a great tackling team has a difficult time getting Deebo Samuel to the ground because his core is so freaking strong, and dude's like a weeble wobble out there. But that all that said, like, the Niners are in a little bit tougher spot in terms of needing to have success early here, because I just really have a tough time seeing them in comeback mode being successful. And that's just because of the strength of the Eagles D-line and the depth of the Eagles D-line, which I think could be a factor here. Now, the other game state that would be interesting is a shootout. You score and answer, which I think is possible. You could definitely see something here where, each team has good scheme and, kind of takes advantages of their matchups, and, is successful in the red zone. And, we have a little bit of a shootout on our hands. In that scenario, I still do favor Eagles to be able to come out victorious because of, again, the depth of the D line, where, it gets deep into the fourth quarter, and, the offensive lines for both teams are starting to get a little gassed, and you have, that 2 extra guys you can go to for the Eagles to kind of generate that pressure in a key situation late in the game. Could be the kind of the deciding factor in something like this. So I have been a doubter in Brock Purdy for a lot of this run that he's been on. Most of that is just, I watch the tape, I see a guy that does not have the physical tool set to really break the game wide open in the same discussion, even as his counterpart in this one, Jalen Hurts, who can throw an unbelievably beautiful deep ball. And I think those things are going to come to fruition in this contest where you're up against, truly elite competition. Brock Purdy really hasn't had to face anyone of note. His most impressive win was last week in terms of opponent strength. And even that, as we talked about, that was a bad game by the Niners. They were lucky to get that win. In a lot of ways, the way that the Cowboys played and coached, I thought, contributed more to the win than really what the Niners were doing in that contest. I think that pretty clearly Shanahan comes in with the schematic coaching advantage into this one, but I give Sirianni aces in terms of in-game decision-making and ability to just navigate the difficult parts of the game. How do you utilize your timeouts? How are you using the end of the first half and the end of the game? And how are you deciding when to go for it and when to kick? If ultimately the Eagles win this game by a narrow margin, by 3, by 6, something, one score, it very realistically could come down to the fact that on some drive, the Eagles have a 3rd and 5 on their opponent's 45-yard line and do kind of a nice misdirection run, get a couple yards, and then go for it on 4th down, whereas Shanahan asks Brock Purdy to do something down the field on 3rd down and then punts. And kind of the specific in-game decision-making difference between these two coaches, I think, could ultimately be a pretty significant factor. So as I kind of lay out all the cards, I'm looking at enough small advantages across different game states, across different aspects of the matchup in favor of the Eagles, that I was fine laying laying the points with them in this one. And again, my fair is 3. And I wouldn't really support, I wouldn't really spook anyone from, getting involved with the Eagles here. I think a couple other fun ways to attack this, just based on the way we both talked about this game. First half being higher scoring than the second half, I think is a realistic high probability, just because if there is a 2-score lead at halftime for either team, all of a sudden this could be a real kind of just wipe the clock out in the second half on the ground. And just in general, kill drives with outstanding pass rush. And then I think team that wins the first half wins the second half is a worthy look too, just because of both teams sort of being structured in order to put away leads. So it's fun sort of kind of alternate ways to attack this one beyond just believing in the Eagles.
Yeah, maybe a couple of fun in-play angles there potentially. Rob, very quickly before we move off this game, I was talking to Drew a little bit off air. I guess the fact Jimmy Garoppolo probably won't make the game as an active, at least, would indicate that no matter how Brock plays, he's going to be playing the full game here, isn't he?
Yeah, I think that's the case. And honestly, I think it's just Purdy's team going forwards into next year as well. I think he's sold himself on as being the guy for this franchise. Probably look for some Trey Lance suitors in the offseason, see if they can unload Lance for a high draft pick or something like that. But yeah, I would be surprised at this point, honestly. The way that he's led them here thus far in the latter half of the year, never say never with any coaching staff, but I would be pretty surprised if we see Jimmy G in this game.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Quick,
Final thoughts there, Drew.
Yeah. One quick kind of prop to look for. See what you can find for Deebo Samuel rushing plus receiving. If the Niners do shock the world here and go into the link and get it done, I would only really believe that it's because Deebo Samuel puts together a heroic effort. The dude is built differently. I was at the NFC Championship game last year with the Niners and the Rams, and Rams won improbably. They did not deserve to win that game. I will be the first to admit. And they're out there on the field celebrating, the blue and gold confetti flying. Every Niner was in the locker room except Deebo Samuel. He was sitting on the bench, just freaking stewing like an absolute psycho. I was like, my goodness gracious! Like, this guy is, he is, relishing this. He's going to have something special. So, I think they have so many different ways they can attack you with the Niners that they largely haven't had to go to him as sort of the Swiss Army knife for this playoff run. But the idea of pulling him and kind of, you getting him going both on the ground and through the short passing game seems to be a no-brainer to me. So look for him to have a big day.
Yeah, definitely pro Eagles from the guys. We'll get to best bets before locking in a bet there. But we'll move on to probably the game this weekend. And there's been a lot of talk with Mahomes' ankle injury. Everyone's been watching the video. Everyone's seen the warm-up at this point. It is the Bengals at the Chiefs. The line's actually been moving it back and forth a little bit while we've been talking between 1.5. It's now landed on 1. We'll take a look at the betting, and we currently have a money line. Chiefs are favourite on the money line, 1.88. Bengals 2.1. But the handicap has gone back to 1, so it's Bengals +1. You can get the Chiefs -1 on Matchbook currently at the time recording at 1.94. And the total for this game is 47.5, slightly shaded towards the over there as well. So yeah, Drew, interesting play. You've written a lot here, which is entertaining to read out. You're like, Chiefs -1. Honestly, can't believe the universe gave us an opportunity to bet Mahomes at home under a field goal. This is when I come in. Are you not concerned about the injury status? But you came in already saying not concerned about his injury status. So I have nothing left to ask you, Drew.
Yeah, another one of these Death Star games where I'm sorry to inform you, but Mahomes will be perfectly functional when he takes the field on Sunday. No, I think this is a treatable injury. The big risk, and again, like, I'm not a doctor. Like, I don't have inside information on this. And oh, by the way, nobody did. There was no whispers or anything, that said, we had guys talking to like his trainer, and his trainer was saying the same stuff that Andy Reid was saying. Everybody had everything was public this cycle. So, don't get conspiracy theory about the way the market was moving when it was all kind of $10,000 bets, before we get to now. It's static, at 50K or whatever. But the general kind of read was if they did some work on Mahomes after the game was over and after the swelling was down and they found a fracture, then he was not going to play. And this was going to be a Chad Henne game. And I think there was a lot of speculative play on the Bengals early in the week with lower limits that was kind of waiting for, is there a fracture here? Or is this just a sort of a standard high ankle sprain that can be treated? And it's ultimately ended up being the later. We have seen him walking, we have seen him practicing, and we have heard reports today that after practicing fully yesterday, there were no limitations today, no regression. This is, Mahomes basically per the usual. And I remember, we've been doing this again. We've been doing this for a long time. Not that many years ago, where Mahomes came out of the game against the Cleveland Browns, and it was a foot injury, but it also might have been a concussion that they weren't really being honest about, and there was a lot of speculation of, is he going to be right against the Bills? And the Bills were the hot side in that game as they went into Kansas City in the AFC Championship game that year, and lo and behold, I was kind of much more willing to listen to the speculation being impactful in that game, because at the time, the Chiefs' offensive line was horrific. They were awful. They couldn't block. And honestly, in every kind of key third down, you needed the wide receivers to get vertical, Travis Kelce to clear out the middle of the field, and then Mahomes to scamper for 20 yards in order to feel like you had a realistic chance to continue to move the chains. And a lot of that Bills game came down to him doing that. And the fact that obviously the Bills have no answer for Travis Kelce, but it was a much more plausible case of him being limited from a mobility standpoint really matters in that game. This time around, it doesn't really feel like they are anywhere close to constructed as far as an offensive vision where they need Mahomes to really get going on the ground. They have a pass blocking unit that is absolutely clearly top 5 in the NFL by my numbers. And I think realistically, Mahomes can camp out in the pocket. He can let his offensive line and his running backs do a healthy amount of the work in this contest if they so choose. And I'm hopeful that that's sort of the plan A here coming into the first half of this game, because the Bengals are, they are soft-ish in the run because they are so insistent on dropping into coverage. And, that's sort of in their defensive DNA. And that is how they have flummoxed you so, effectively at times in the matchup between these two teams. And I would say that in general, if you can run it down their throats early in this game and get Lou Anarumo to back off his drop 8, then all of a sudden, things open up and Mahomes can kind of carve you in the intermediate and deep part of the field with the weapons that he's got available here. This looks like a really decent opportunity, in my opinion, for the Chiefs to flex a little bit. I think there's been way too much way too much recency bias on the Bengals beating the Bills last week. Way too many people have put stock in the Bengals offensive line all of a sudden is now, maybe they're good. Those guys? No. That was weather-induced kind of overperforming, almost certainly. And the fact that they were in a plus game state where they're up by 2 scores for the entire second half. Like this Bengals team at a deficit, trying to block Chris Jones in the middle, best of luck to you. This is going to be a very, very different feel in terms of pass rush versus Burrow than I think a lot of the games we've seen recently, and certainly much more like what was expected last week than what we actually saw. And then, in the end, Chiefs to me look like, a perfectly healthy team everywhere outside of Mahomes' ankle. And, I like their coverage matchups, better matchups now, healthier cornerbacks now than when they played this team last time. And if we're just kind of being frank about the number, 2.5 on the road for these guys against the Bengals December 4th. Mm-hmm. Does that not matter anymore? Like that, we're just going to entirely throw that out the window. And honestly, that game was pretty much a draw. Travis Kelce doesn't fumble. Chiefs probably win that one. You go back to last year and you want to say like, oh yeah, well, Bengals are 3-0 against the Chiefs. Well, the first one of those was because the refs literally put their finger on the scale and called a million defensive pass interferences in that game. The second one was because something happened to Mahomes at halftime and he came out and played the worst half of football of his career. And then in the third one, it was basically a draw. I am not here to tell you that there is some magic recipe through 3-game sample that the Bengals have all of the answers for Patrick Mahomes, because no one has the answers for Patrick Mahomes. And honestly, the more ways he's learning to win, the more likely this is going to be an extended, successful run for him. I think that this is pretty clearly Chiefs to the right side. And I honestly think it's a plus EV bet now at 1. And as limits go up and people are kind of getting more and more confident that, oh, yeah, Mahomes looks fine. He looks good. Like, I could very easily see this closing in the ballpark of Chiefs minus 150 on the money line, minus 2.5, maybe even minus 3 if the right people get involved here. So I don't know. This looks like potential for Chiefs, to pull off, a type of outcome that kind of people feel stupid not seeing this coming.
I think Drew fancies the Chiefs. Well, look, we'll get to that section. You've set it up well, Drew. Rob, I thought it was a pretty good point on the offensive line with Bengals, which I think this will ultimately come down to if Bengals can score enough to keep up with the Chiefs and Mahomes. Is there a case that they overperformed last week, similar to maybe some of the quarterbacks coming in from the wildcard weekend? Or with an offensive line, it's obviously a lot more. There was a lot more done there compared to a one-off quarterback game that they could maybe give Burrow enough time to have an impact on this game.
I think there's definitely a case that they overperformed. I know a lot of people were saying, the offensive linemen that we're missing, like left tackle Jonah Williams, hasn't performed all that well this season. The drop-off is not that bad. I strongly disagree with that overall. Listen, this is extremely challenging to break down. And I'm going to echo the same point that Drew made off the top. I'm not a doctor. I can watch Pat Mahomes walk up to the podium to take, his presser and how he steps on the step and so on and so forth. But I'm just forming a subjective opinion on the game if I do that. And that's not how I like to bet. If Mahomes was anywhere near 100%, KC -1 is one of the bets of the year, probably, because exactly like Drew mentioned, these teams played at the beginning of December. Chiefs were favored 2.5 on the road. Like this would not be the number. So there's a lot of people, including Drew, who just think that this is a bargain on the Chiefs because of the injury situation, and that's entirely fair. For me, that's not particularly the way that I like to bet. I've never had a high ankle sprain in my life. I don't know what it's like, but I know that there's people out there who've told me that like they're completely immobile over the course of a week or it's extremely painful, so on and so forth. I will make the case for the Bengals, just in general, because if Mahomes is limited in any capacity, if the ankle injury is impacting him, he cannot move in the pocket. I think that is does a massive disservice to the Chiefs, not because Mahomes can't stand in the pocket and throw the ball, but so much of the Chiefs' EPA comes from his escapability, his ability to, create something when the play breaks down. And when you look at Mahomes' pressure dropbacks this year, only 11.4% of them have resulted in a sack. That's the lowest pressure to sack rate amongst any qualified quarterback in the NFL. So teams generate pressure, but they don't sack him. His elusiveness is important. If he's a sitting duck there, I think that changes a lot of things for the Chiefs. Now, if he's fully in form, I'm not disagreeing that this is a valuable number with the Chiefs, but the Bengals do very well against quarterbacks who can kind of scramble, take extra time when the play breaks down, and so on and so forth. When you look at their defensive success rate this year, when opposing quarterbacks have 3 or more seconds to throw, they're second in the league. They're also second in the league in EPA per play when that happens. They're 5th in defensive success rate at defending quarterbacks who are outside the pocket. They're 3rd in success rate against quarterback scrambles. This is something that's been a strength for their defense for the majority of the season. And then on the other side of the ball, the offensive line is definitely a valid concern. It's a huge concern, but Joe Burrow gets the ball out very quickly. He threw the ball on an average of 2.4 seconds this year. That's the second fastest throwing time in the entire league. And that's exactly the type of quarterback that has killed the Chiefs this year. If you look at the Chiefs' numbers this season on quarterbacks who've gotten rid of the ball in 2.5 seconds or less, they're 20th in success rate, 21st in EPA per play. And just to put that into perspective, their success rate and EPA per play for the season in all situations was 12th and 16th. So they got much worse in situations where quarterbacks can get the ball out of their hands quickly. And in particular in this matchup, you're going to have a lot of 3 wide receiver sets for the Bengals. You're going to have Jalen Watson having to defend one of T. Higgins or Jamar Chase on the outside. And that's a situation where I think, bad offensive line or not, you get the ball into that receiver's hands and they can do damage against Jalen Watson. So I'm not as bullish on the Chiefs, even if Mahomes is healthy. If we get a situation here where the market steams on the Chiefs prior to game time because he looks better and better in practice this week, I would be inclined to potentially bet the Bengals at post. But I honestly don't see myself getting involved in this game unless we see some sort of extreme movement at this point.
Yeah, and just before I bring Drew in on a final point, you said to wait to live bet. What sort of angles would you be looking for live bet? Is that purely Mahomes that you mentioned, Rob?
Yeah,
Or
like this to me is just, live betting's a different breed altogether, especially if you're trying to get down a lot of money. You tend to pay more vig and so on and so forth. But this one to me is like, let me just wait to see what Mahomes looks like on the first possession, and then potentially I can find a valuable number in game. Now, you might be paying more for the Chiefs at that point, so there's maybe an argument against it, but I don't like uncertainty unless I feel very confident that the market is not capturing something correctly. Like, uncertainty can be your friend, right? Some people don't, they're like, oh, how am I going to bet this game? I don't know. Well, in some cases, you might just feel you have a strong opinion on something, and betting into a market where there's all this uncertainty works to your advantage. In this game in particular, I don't have a read on it at all, period. And I think it could go a number of ways depending on the status and the health of Patrick Mahomes. If Patrick Mahomes drops back and he's hobbling on 1 foot to hand the ball off early in the game, then the ankle's a problem, right? So look for stuff like that. Potentially a live betting opportunity might be the way to go.
Yeah, and there could be an overreaction to that, an underreaction, like you said, Rob. Drew, what about some of the points that Rob makes? And I'm like the quickness that Joe Burrow gets the ball out, particularly against the Bills, that can't be underestimated. And if the offensive line doesn't have to necessarily be an all-time offensive line for Burrow to get the ball out.
Sure. In the back of my head, the risk that I feel, the red team case that I would make for the Bengals revolves around more kind of poking holes in some of the issues with the Chiefs. Like, the Chiefs defense is pretty untested. Every time they've gone up against an elite quarterback, Rob kind of did a nice job of breaking that down. Like, particularly quarterbacks who can get the ball out, they've struggled. Last week, they generated a ton of pressures against Trevor Lawrence, but Trevor Lawrence was not inclined to try to get the ball out of his hands quickly, and I think that hurt the Jaguars defense tremendously. The first time these two teams played, they generated 1 pressure against Joe Burrow and got 1 sack. That's not going to be enough. They're going to need to do much, much better at generating pressure quickly. And if Burrow's getting the ball out of his hands at the same sort of clip we've seen throughout this year, then it's not going to be an easy, clean win for the Chiefs. They're going to have to go score for score and outscore the Bengals. And that's entirely possible that is how this game turns out. This game turns into sort of a score and answer affair, at which point I'm still fine holding Chiefs at the price that I'm holding. Like, I don't mind having, Chiefs in a coin flip at plus money. The other kind of key point, though, is that the game states where things are working well for the Chiefs early and not well for the Bengals early is where I think that the Chiefs defense starts to grow in terms of their ability to bully these guys and their ability to generate pressure and their ability to make that be sort of the distinguishing factor about how the game plays out. I think the Bengals are going to try to run a balanced offensive approach here. They're going to try to get their running backs involved. But if the offensive line isn't getting the same push because they're now not on a snowy field, they're on a regular, relatively firm surface, then running plays being minus EV for the Bengals and putting them in long down and distance where they have to let plays mature down the field and Burrow has to hold on to the ball a little bit longer or Burrow has to scramble to get first downs. I'm willing to kind of count on those being more likely early and hopeful that, that gets the Chiefs into a game state where they can play a little bit of bully ball here and get the crowd going, and really utilize the home field advantage in some ways. And, I think there's realistically, the anticipation of what the Bengals are going to do defensively is easier, in my opinion, for Andy Reid and his offensive staff to predict and come up with a plan for out of the gate than the other way around, I think. So, counting on a little bit of Chiefs being able to sort of have a schematic advantage out of the gate, get a lead, and put the Bengals in somewhat of a difficult spot in comeback mode.
Okay. That's the Bengals and Chiefs. Just before we move on from this game, Rob, is there any sort of trend out there for winding up Mahomes and how that gets on? This Burrowhead talk I've thoroughly enjoyed all week. We see it in every sport, the winding up, and managers swear by it and coaches swear by it, that using that motivation. I'm sure that'll be somewhere mentioned in the Chiefs locker room.
For sure. I mean, if I have not, I was looking for a trend this week to appease the audience that wanted to see trendy Rob. I can't find much. I really can't find much. Aside from the Bengals just being 5-1 against the spread, the playoffs the past couple of years, 5-1 to the under as well. These are very small samples. Like you guys know me. If I do try to throw out a trend, I try to have like some logic behind why maybe the market is not capturing that, or I just throw it out because it's interesting. But no trendy Rob appearances this week, Dan. I know you're hoping for something a little bit better out of me, but I got nothing for you.
We'll have to count on an anthem trend come Super Bowl.
Oh, no. Yeah. If that market still exists, Drew. If we ever see anthem prices again.
Rob is going to promise me that he will have the best Super Bowl trend you can imagine.
I'll find something.
There's enough markets for you there. Before we move on, guys, we will cover best bets. I will get to a couple of comments. A reminder to hit that like button and comment if you want to get involved in the £50 free bet competition. If you're listening to the podcast, head over to our YouTube channel. All you have to do is click the thumbs up button. Comment any questions for the guys maybe you want to ask in the Super Bowl. Give us your best bet, any sort of feedback for the show, whatever you want to hear, or comment, let us know in the comments. It's a £50 free bet for new or existing customers. I want to get a couple of comments here, guys. Rob, this is to you. PJ Walker, like he for about week, say 6 to maybe week 10, he was non-stop in the YouTube comments, but bar maybe one small appearance, he hasn't been back, which is a pity. They have a new head coach as well there. So.
I think he might have been offended by me calling him PJ Tucker a couple times accidentally, and then he just said, "Screw this! I'm not even going to get my name right. I'm out of here." But yeah, Frank Reich is hired in Carolina as of today, which is interesting. I didn't think. It's funny how like we go from this guy is an amazing coach to this guy is horrendous in such a short period of time. And I think Frank Reich was so well liked by everyone in the community for a while, and then the Colts just kind of like fell off. And honestly, most of it was just poor quarterback play. I like that hire. I think Reich had some innovative ideas. Now, this is like a prove it type of situation at this point, but yeah, I don't mind that at all. So maybe we'll get a resurgence of PJ Walker at some point.
Yeah. Love the Frank Reich hire. The failure in Indy, I think you can hang on the owner and the GM more than you can Frank Reich. They stocked up and loaded up on top tier talent at the positions that mean the least.
Yep.
Surprise, it didn't work. Like Carolina's got elite cornerbacks. They've got elite pass rush. They've got elite wide receivers. They just need a quarterback now.
They got, Jim Irsay is just an absolute disaster of a human being. Like if they bring back Jeff Saturday, I read today Jeff Saturday's had more interviews than wins, which I found very funny. Yeah, like people, we thought this was just like a joke, right? Like the Colts are hiring Saturday, they're tanking and whatever. Like this is serious now, where you really got to wonder. I have a friend that's a Colts fan, and he's not happy days for him.
I see a comment here on I need a Gatorade color. We will be having a lot of props in the matchbook betting exchange, but we do pride ourselves that we stay away from the luck ones, and we'll have as many proper bets and proper prop bets. But there will be a lot of cool markets out there. And here's the last trend here. I'm only getting this live without reading it, but in 80 Mahomes starts, the Chiefs have scored 24 or more points 80% of the time.
Wow.
I like that. I got a trend for you as well. Pat Mahomes has hosted the AFC Championship game every year. He's been the starting quarterback in the NFL.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
What in the hell? Like this guy, like people want to anoint Joe Burrow the next Tom Brady. He's right in front of you guys. He's hosting the AFC Championship game every year. I don't know what to tell you. Like this is, he's performing at a level that exceeds anything we've ever seen at this position.
You know what? I look at the final four teams here in the playoffs, and like it's just becoming more apparent year in and year out what works in the NFL, right? Obviously, the quarterback position is huge. You either find yourself an elite quarterback and lock up that elite quarterback, or you got to ride that rookie deal quarterback and just load up the roster with talent. And anything in between, like look at all these guys that have signed deals: Dak Prescott, Kirk Cousins, Derek Carr, Jared Goff. Like it ain't that ain't the solution at the end of the day. And Daniel Jones is going to get one of those contracts this offseason.
Yeah, and quick comment on the Gatorade color. If we're right, and if it's Philly KC, like you better be quick to that market because there's a lot of vets on Philly who were in a Super Bowl, and there's a lot of vets on KC who were in a Super Bowl, and vets don't like you changing the Gatorade flavor. So you pretty much know exactly what your two colors you're working with as soon as they open that market.
Well, if it's Philly KC and you mix green with red, that produces yellow, I believe, my colors. So
I did not think we'd be getting on the Gatorade colors. My own fault for bringing it up. Guys, you've been in good form, best bets. We were 1-1 last week. Drew, well done on the Eagles -8. I think you were talking yourself into going Eagles -9, 10, 11. Like the price was changing on screen. You were like, just give me whatever. What are you?
I needed it after my wild card taking the Bucks. So, you know,
that's true.
I was due, as they say in the trends biz. I'm going to take the Chiefs. And it's mostly just price based. I think both of these games should be -3 for the home teams. I think home field advantage, weirdly, is still a little bit underrepresented in the market in the playoffs based on what I looked at this year. So give me the Chiefs -1.5 now at 2.0. And I think, in a game state where they're ahead, I feel like we're having a good laugh that this was ever the price. In a game state where it's a coin flip, I still don't mind going to war with Pat.
Yeah, and you can take the money line if you're listening. -1 is currently 1.94. It'll be very interesting. The one guarantee is probably won't be like that till kickoff. There's just so much money back and forth on this line. Rob, for best bet for you this week.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Eagles for all the reasons mentioned earlier, but the 49ers vulnerable against quarterback runs where they've struggled this year, particularly against scrambles. You look at the 49ers defense, the strength, their edge rush, the defensive line, the front seven in general. The Eagles can go toe-to-toe with the offensive line that they've put together there. So I think that mitigates a lot of the 49ers defensive strength. I don't think that they have the corners to shut down A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, both on the outside. On the other side of the ball, Eagles defensively, very good at defending in breaking routes. They've done that really well all year. They've limited yards after catch, which I think is extremely important when you're facing the 49ers. So like the possibility of them being able to limit these in breaking routes. On top of that, this Eagles pass rush is ferocious. They don't have to pressure to get home, but they don't have to blitz to get home to generate pressure. But when they do as well, they're very successful at that because they have good cover corners on the outside. So I really like the matchup advantages across the field. I don't think Kyle Shanahan has a huge edge in coaching over Nick Sirianni either. I really liked the game plans that Sirianni put together this year for the Eagles. So I think Philadelphia is the better team, and they match up well with the 49ers. I'll lay the 2.5 with them.
Yeah. Well, if they go to plan, an Eagles Chiefs Super Bowl will be brilliant in 2 weeks, and we'll be back with a Super Bowl preview. Rob, before I go, I know you mentioned to me off air before that Championship Sunday you get together with a few of the boys from back home and watch both the games. It is the, like, I know the Super Bowl is the Super Bowl and everyone gets into it, but for NFL fans, I think this Sunday is the Sunday.
Championship Sunday for me is the best sporting day of the year just because of what it means to me. Like I barely see my friends anymore. Obviously people move on with their lives. They have kids, they get married. It's the one day of the year that we all just cherish and get together and, have a few pops and enjoy the game, play some cards afterwards. So for me, it's there's Super Bowl's huge for like what it brings and the event. But Championship Sunday for me is my favorite day of the year.
Plus, you get to cash your Djokovic Australian Open tickets in the morning, so everybody's already flush with cash by the time the games to kick off. So
that'll be Sunday. Yeah. Are you on Djokovic? Drew,
not for anything meaningful, but Djokovic 3-1 over Tsitsipas is going to be a bet as soon as we get that market up.
So I'm not into tennis, but I started watching Breakpoint on Netflix.
Oh my God, is it good?
And I'm ready to get back into tennis. Like it's sort of like I've always been a Formula One fan, but there got to be years where Mercedes was just so dominant that I didn't really care. And then Drive to Survive came out on Netflix. I watched that. And I'm like, okay, I'm all in again on Formula One. I think Breakpoint is going to do that for me on Netflix as well.
I have absolutely loved Breakpoint. I got caught up on it this week once tennis wasn't starting as early, and I must be insufferable to watch it with, because my wife probably just like, I'm done with this, because it's like I'm like, oh, she went into this match as like a $3 like, you know, she was minus 300 in this match. Why are they making it like this is a big, you know, and or like, oh, they didn't even tell us, like Nadal was dealing with an ab injury when that happened. They didn't even say it, you know, like it's but at the same time, like having kind of been very viscerally involved in last season's betting and now seeing it kind of told from this manner is awesome. Netflix needs to pivot hard from whatever tween movie making enterprises and just put all their money into the sports documentary space, because it is so good.
Yeah, agreed. They've done a really good job.
I think the golf one that's coming out, even if you're not into golf, for anyone listening, the fact that PJ Tour and Live Golf all last year, they had cameras of that. Rory McIlroy, we even have the current situation with Patrick Reed's throwing a tee and Rory McIlroy in Dubai. I mean, this is for golf. I'm a massive golf fan. This is that documentary is going to be out, I think, next month, perhaps on Netflix as well. So, Drew, they're already listening. They're every single sport you can think of has it. And look, the NFL have been doing it for years, so fair play.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think maybe the only thing is they picked too many nice players for this first season. They need to get some of the bring out some of the. There's a lot of behind the scenes spite on tour and dislike among certain players and certain rivalries that I'd like to see exposed a little more. But maybe, you know, you don't want that. You don't want to be kind of cast in that light, so you don't agree to do the show. So
yep. That's what happened with F1, right? Like the Max Verstappen said he didn't want a part of it because they were trying to manufacture rivalries for the show. Which, I mean, I think there was definitely some actual rivalries there, but they don't want to bring that to the public light of like, oh, I can't stand this guy or so on and so forth. But I love these sports docs, and listen, I don't have the lens that Drew has when I'm watching tennis documentaries to say, oh yeah, like this is actually not an underdog story. This is just like a huge favorite winning. But I've been to live tennis events before. You know, I know the pressure that these players go through, but you actually don't know the pressure that these players, like it is absurd the amount of pressure that they put on themselves. It's just really well done. Really well done documentary.
Yeah, tennis is unique in that regard because you are alone in your head. Yeah. And if you have never done it, in the back of your head, you have a voice saying you cannot do it. And it is unbelievable to see these people crack and talk about. They're beforehand. They're like, yeah, I'm talking to my coach. I'm not going to crack. I'm not going to crack. Crack instantly. It's just like bang, no hope. Like, oh man. And they've done a good job of kind of spinning up the underdogs. I'll say fairly. Like Ons Jabeur winning the Madrid. If you haven't seen that one, that was an amazing run. Incredible story. She was like 25-30-1 before that tournament to win. That was wildly unexpected and cool. Taylor Fritz, when he hurt his ankle.
Yeah, that was amazing.
I remember that one. Like there were a lot of people in the tennis space who were like, I mean, this is free money on Nadal, but Fritz is probably going to retire, so it's not really worth it. And then he goes and beats him. That was absolutely ridiculous. He went off, I think, 5.585 was his money line price in that match. And yeah, people literally were like, "Oh, this is free money, but he's probably going to retire, so forget about it."
Well,
he wins.
His entourage literally thought he had no chance to win.
Yeah,
back. They were convinced. They're like, "You're just going to get embarrassed out there." Like, just and he's. Anyways, it's really good. I love sports documentaries.
If you can treat Taylor Fritz so that he can beat Nadal, you can treat Pat Mahomes so that he can finally get a win against Joe Burrow.
There you go. If that's not the inspiration story, I don't know what is.
I knew there was a reason we were going through all the tennis and every other sport to get back to what we're here for, and that's the Chiefs and Mahomes heading to the Super Bowl. My thanks to Drew. My thanks to Rob. Reminder to like and hit that and comment on below on the YouTube video. Let us know your thoughts on the show, and you'll be in for a chance to win a £50 free bet for new and existing customers. Until then, enjoy Championship Sunday. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.